let's watch this record bull run that we've seen. Tech stocks continuing to lead the charge, outpacing both the Dow and the S&P. Nicole Webb, I'm pleased to say, here with us now, Wealth Enhancement Group Senior Vice President. Is now, though, the time to be picky when you see overall nearing record highs?
Yeah, your conversation was brilliantly put. I mean, across all sides of it, the market is really interesting right now. And when we think about it as a view into the future, it is clear that there is a ton of enthusiasm about onshoring, reshoring, just the investment here that we have not seen in over a decade. You layer in with that productivity, which in theory should offset incremental output costs of production here that we couldn't get otherwise without these productivity increases. And so then on the other side of that, you also have to think about the growth perspective. And so I think there is just a lot of consumer enthusiasm about the growth expectation here versus elsewhere. And so I do think that's driving a lot of this. It was interesting to see consumer sentiment starting to slip, but consumer behavior hasn't yet. So it's watching what they do versus what they say. And we're just not seeing data from MasterCard, Visa that is matching the consumer sentiment survey we saw last week.
All right, so that's interesting. But let me ask you this, because one thing we're observing in the economy is people trying to make things last longer, do more with less. You might not buy the new car, you might fix the old car. Does that give you something, if that's right, does that give you something to play here?
Brian, this is so interesting. And a conversation I had with one of our analysts this week was, do you remember when you thought of gifts as diamonds wrapped in a bow, and then it was commercials of cars wrapped in bows, and now it's telling people about luxury travel. You're seeing just some of these societal trend changes where things are going in and out of favor. Right now, quiet luxury. So we're seeing places like Ulta that benefited so much from loud facial luxury starting to slip. The Lululemon slip, but the Gucci slip. But you're also seeing other names that are doing very well under the quiet luxury branding, like Hermes is an example. So there's just so many fast fashion themes that are actually transitioning over into other parts of consumer behavior.
Tell my husband about the Hermes theme.
I want to follow up on that, what you were saying about consumer sentiment as a reading and how people are actually spending, but this also shift down from the luxury into lesser brands. I mean, at the end of the day, the consumer is 2/3 of the U.S. economy. We need certain things to live. We need to refresh our clothes. We need to buy a certain amount of food. We need to keep shelter, roof over our head, right? So unless you're out of a job, you're going to spend whatever you have to keep doing that. So to a certain degree, the consumer is going to hold up. It's just not going to be the same consumer.
And Jackie, to pull it back to an investment thesis, this is where I think it's important that we recognize why interest rate cuts would be important to small caps, and it's because it's where people are employed. And so, having a growth outlook again in small caps would be really good for the consumer as a whole, because so much of the American population is employed in the small and mid-cap spectrum. And we lose sight of that when we speak to trends of where to deploy a dollar. The other really interesting thing about housing is, and we don't talk about it enough, we're just undersupplied. And so we can't get equilibrium in price back there through holding interest rates high, because what we really need is we need supply and inventory, both in multifamily and in single-family residential. And until we find some equilibrium in that space, an interest rate cut today may very well just put price pressure upwards on house prices. And so, again, that doesn't mean the consumer won't feel incentivized, because mentally they'll feel good about a lower interest rate. But there's some themes here that I think have more to the story than maybe we give them at the surface.
Well, housing supply is certainly a big story that we've been following. So we appreciate you bringing light to that conversation again here today. Nicole, thanks so much.